welcome to the Long Road Podcast. The journey goes ever on with the Long Road. This episode, music like a fine wine. We take a look back at the origins of our shared musical heritage and the confluence of events that led to folk, jazz and rock all combining to create the sound of the Long Road. The Long Road Podcast is exploring the world of the vagabond, the troubadour, the adventurer. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. And if those are the sort of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We're embracing all of those things, celebrating all of that stuff. And we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings! I am Chris, the Bish Lydon. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, please do comment on our Facebook page. Let us know the bits you enjoy the most. Or if there's things you think we should try to mix things up, let us know that as well. I've had a quick glance at our top listener countries before I sat down to record this. The USA is still top of the board. But there's some new listeners from Switzerland that have brought that into third place. Some listeners in Luxembourg and Jordan as well. Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Russia, South Africa, Hungary, they're all on the list. It's quite remarkable. So hello, wherever in the world you are. We're going to crack straight onto the content today. We do The Long Road Revealed on our most listened to track of all time, Wrapped Up in You. It's got almost 30,000 listens on Spotify. We'll do a bit of a comparison of one of the early demo versions that Steve Bonham recorded to send to me and Kev alongside the final released version, so you can sort of see where things started off and how they ended up sounding. And then the main content of today's podcast is some extracts from a chat that Steve and I had a few weeks ago, not long after we'd come out of the recording studio, having spent 2 weeks recording our new songs for the upcoming EP releases this year. A quick shout out to Stuart Jones at Woodworm Studios for the undeniable role he's played in the Long Road sound over the years. He's a great musician and a great engineer. Steve and I spoke a bit about how me and him started making music together way back in the year 2000, and the musical combination of folk and jazz and rock that Steve, me and Kev, the big man, each bring to making the unique Long Road sound. I love this quote that came up during that chat, which Steve was quoting, I think from Kev, the big man, more, about our style of acoustic music. Acoustic music can be angry and passionate and damned heavy, as well as the sweetness and light and the melancholy. And I just love that. For me in our music, the depth isn't just in the dark and the loud, it's in there in the quiet and the light and all the shades in between as well. Must apologise for some cracks and popples on the audio during this week's conversation. I think one of the mics must have been a little bit dodgy. And in fact, we did have to stop recording at one point because one of the mics seemed to switch itself off randomly. The light went off. But anyway, the show must go on, and it did. So this week on The Long Road Revealed, we dive deeper into how Wrapped Up in You from our American Wilderness EP from October 2019, how that song came about. It begins with sort of an instrumental / technical thing, really, a thing called a capo. Now, not being a guitarist, these are a bit of a mystery to me, but essentially a capo is something that you clamp over your guitar strings, normally all 6 strings at once, to shorten the length of the strings so they're pitched a bit higher. Often they'll be used as a sort of time saver if the guitar's tuned to, say, open D, i.e. it plays a D chord when all the strings are strummed. But we wanted to play that particular song in E flat, so a semitone higher, for whatever reason. It's simple, you just put a capo on the first fret and D becomes E flat. Now Steve's here in a moment. He's going to be talking about a thing called a partial capo, which I hadn't heard of until Steve introduced it to me, which does the same thing, but only on some of the strings. But as a piano player and tuba player, this is when my head really starts to just melt, much as it does when Steve uses different tunings for his guitar. In my head, it would be like somebody rearranging the combination of white and black keys on the piano keyboard, and still expect to be able to play the song. It just messes with my head. I just wouldn't be able to compute it. Or, I don't know, on the tuba, changing the length of the slides that the valves are on. So pressing first valve down, what it normally does, it now does something different. It'll be a lower note or a higher note, whatever. It would just completely, I wouldn't be able to handle it. So a shout out to all those guitarists out there that handle these different tunings. I couldn't do it. And some people's brains cope with it. I guess if you spend your whole time working with these changes, playing with these changes, it just becomes the normal, doesn't it? And it probably makes sense to you. So we'll hear from Steve about the origins of Wrapped Up in You, and then we've got, hopefully, an interesting sort of side-by-side comparison of the original demo that Steve recorded on his phone all those months ago, compared with the final released version from the studio.
Someone was asking me the other day how I write songs, and I guess it's not an unusual question. And the real answer is any way I can. Sometimes I start with a word, sometimes I start with a bit of tune, sometimes it all comes together. But whatever way you do it, there's usually some little musical spark, something that makes you hear something you hadn't heard before, that think, that could be interesting, that could be something. And one of the things that really worked for me recently was last year when I was in the States. My old friend Rob Mahale, fantastic songwriter, he gave me a partial capo, which I've never used before or even seen. Partial capo is something that holds some but not all of the strings down. So if I play this chord with a full capo, and you get that sound, and then if you play it with a partial capo on, which you can put either on the top three strings or the bottom three strings, get this beautiful different sound. And as soon as I had this, I started messing around doing different things. There's an old chord progression, it's used in everything. I mean, everyone's done this thing where you go from a shape like that million songs, but then so that was a full capo, but then picking up this, I thought, I can do something here, and kept the same old shapes but new sounds. And basically, that's what became Wrapped Up in You. And it's a guitar picking piece which I knew and loved. It took me a little while to find some words, and then literally the whole song came together in 5 minutes. Total writing time, probably less than a quarter of an hour. And it's the most successful song we've ever done. That's how it goes sometimes.
So for the side-by-side, we'll start with the intro, the first verse and the chorus. It's all quite short, so they're going to be interpolated. There's a couple of bars from the demo version, which is just Steve singing and playing his guitar, and then a couple of bars from the final release with the full band playing, and it sort of switches back and forth between those two states. And you'll hear that on the final version the tempo's a bit punchier, and the feel you get from that driving bass line really kicks in. The eagle-eared of you might just spot the old tuba line in the chorus too, if you have a nice close listen out for that.
Later on my gun, my long day was done. I was looking to light my load. Stop rolling dice, I've learned to think twice. I said goodbye to the road. Wrapped up in you. Wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you. When you came into view, it was all I could do to stand up.
And the next bit we'll have a listen to is the instrumental refrain. Again, first from the demo and then from the release. The release version is pretty faithful to the original. Obviously, the sort of range is a bit greater. We've got that driving bass line and then these high piano lines, giving it a bit of character up there as well. So have a listen to this. And to finish off, we'll play you the whole finished song. So this is Wrapped Up in You.
I laid down my gun, the long day was done. I was looking to lighten the load. Stopped rolling dice, I'd learned to think twice. I said goodbye to the road. Wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you. When you came into view, it was all I could do to stand up and open the gate. Something I would find would do things to my mind, gave up all resistance to my fate. Wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you. With the sun on your skin, you smile, let me in, I put my hat on the back of your door. Your eyes catch a fire like a lighter on the wire, couldn't help but come back for more. Wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you. You're a poet, you're a lover, you're an angel undercover, you're the best thing that happened to me. Nothing that is fake, there's no one on the take. You're the fruit from the magical tree. Wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you, wrapped up in you. Surrender to a night of bliss. We're rolling and tumbling into heaven. I am stumbling, I never had a lover like this. Wrapped up in you, 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 wrapped up in you.
That was Wrapped Up in You from the Long Roads EP called American Wilderness. You can hear the other tracks from that EP on Spotify or Apple Music. Just search for American Wilderness or Steve Bonham or The Long Road and you'll find it. If you really liked it, why not go ahead and purchase the song or even the whole EP. Support your independent artists. Now on to the next section. Steve Bonham and me, Chris the Bish Lydon, in conversation about the origins of our shared music making and what makes the songwriting process for The Long Road interesting and exciting. And I'll see you on the other side. When we started doing music together, almost 20 years ago,
I know.
it's probably probably 20
You
years
weren't
ago.
born when we started making music together.
Yes, it's true. But 20 years ago, we were making music together, and we had our old band, Dr. Big Love, which is still out there on Spotify if anyone wants to.
Paying us £1 a year.
Dig it up, yeah. Well, £1 a year, that's gone up, yeah. And I remember back then we were always talking about going to like where all this stuff was coming from. This term swampy music, or going back to the source. And I think now we've actually got there.
Yeah.
It's taken us 20 years, but I remember one of our friends said to me, "You finally cracked Dr. Big Love." It's like, yeah. And maybe it was always going to take us a little while to work out how we were doing it. We're not trying to imitate other people or other songs. I remember what the phrase that you used a few weeks ago. I can't remember what it was now. Music that's in there in your unconscious, but you've never heard anything like it before, kind of thing. All the components are sort of in there. You know, we were saying in the studio, I don't know anybody else is making music like this. I think it's true. I think there's something about this, the way that we've made these songs, that it's, unique's a funny word, but maybe this is unique.
I don't think, that's true. I don't think I could have made music like this when I was younger.
Yeah.
We've got a thing in the world at the moment. We've got, this kind of ageist view of things, that musicians do all their great stuff when they're young, and then, get bloated on drugs and stuff, a lot of stuff, and then lose it. And actually, quite a lot probably do. On the other hand, some things like wine,
yes,
you can't rush. And I don't know if this is wine, this music, but I think there is a bit about saying it takes a lot of different pieces to sort of get all to the right stage, So I was lucky to re-find Americana 7 or 8 years ago with people I knew who really loved it and talked about it, and that kind of was a rediscovery about the same time as you were really getting into that particularly deranged and mad piano that you can do. About the same time we bumped into Kev again. It was like
a confluence of events,
rock and roll encyclopedia of how to do it properly. So those bits all needed to come together at the right time.
I think that's been that's maybe that's part of the uniqueness for us, is that there's these three sort of distinct influences from you, me, and Kev.
Yeah.
But the crossover, the point where we meet and cross over, and that's as you say, encyclopedic knowledge, but just Kev has been everywhere and done everything.
Yeah.
All kinds of music. Perhaps most of it has been rock and sort of pop stuff, and metal as well, which definitely does has. There's been a couple of influences of the metal vocals in the recent stuff.
That drumming would frighten the children.
Yes, the drumming. Amazed those drum skins survived. I'm amazed the sticks survived. And then, the influence that I've got of sort of the blues and the jazzy world, and the love of these, the Americana edging on the country, fused with the sort of folk background that you've got. Those things all combine together to make, unique, certainly different, and it's certainly the sort of stuff that we've been trying to do for
and
a couple of
it's
decades.
an interesting thing, and just trying to think as we talk about other people who think you did that. I mean, I think back in my childhood, that was one of the great things they don't get any credit for. The Stones did. They weren't mimicking the blues. In a kind of, they obviously did some blues tracks. But they were mixing everything they knew into it, and that's what maybe the Kinks did in the 60s. That those sort of people have always been the writers that have interested me. They don't mimic, full stop. I also think when you get the three of us, what was interesting was it opens the doors to your own mind. So where I've written a lyric and Kev comes back with something to go, some music for it, which we can work on. It's very different to anything either of us would do, and it's almost feels completely freeform in places. Something like the Ballad of Duane and Billy Marie is incredible. It's really hard to sing, really, because you just is so freeform.
And I think that's a great thing. You know, funny enough, when I was writing something for one of those international online magazines the other day at Warden Studios, and I came up with this idea that what we've got and what that studio is, so it is common ground. You know, and common ground is a place where conversations can happen and stuff can get done together and changed because you're all in it together. And Stuart Jones there, as the engineer, is brilliant at that. So it releases quite a lot of potential. The idea of common ground, I think that's a very important idea. It's where conversations happen, musical conversations and ideas. If I was writing a song at home, I wouldn't have that conversation. So I still might write a good song, don't get me wrong, but it gets exciting for me was when you got that common ground where you're all working together and the four of us listening together in the same place at the same time without status. As you know, I'm the T-boy when we're recording, so it is without status, and it lets the magic happen. It lets the brew get going.
Well, I think one of the things that Stuart does that is brilliant at as well is he understands what we're trying to do straight away. Basically, he tends to get our music and our sound straight away, and he can offer advice that we sometimes can't see ourselves. Like we can't sometimes see if we're doing too much.
Yeah. And
one of the things he often says, we need to pare this back. Let's make it more, cut straight to the message rather than, some of the faffing around that we might do instinctively. And he says, let's make it simpler, do it again, but let's just cut it back. And that's, he's nearly always spot on.
Well, don't you think that's the joy of music? And I am really aware now, when I think about how different that is now to the processes of other songwriting, which tends to be, people with garage band or any of those things working on their own, doing their own guitar parts, their own bass parts, their own effects, their own singing. I mean, it's such a different way. It's not, I wouldn't presume to say it's worse, but it's a very different thing that you're doing. It's a very different experience, and I do think it sounds different.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
It does sound. I mean, I look back on recording 15 tracks, Chris, 15 tracks, and just stuff happening. You think, oh well, I've never dreamt.
Yeah.
I mean, we were joking about Kev's thunderous drums.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? I thought he was going to smash the studio to pieces at one time, but it sounds wonderful.
Great. Yeah.
Wonderful. There are probably out there people who are into their music being a little more refined who are going to be very upset. But I think I got a quote from him or something which says something like, wanting to prove that acoustic music can be angry and passionate and damned heavy as well as sweetness and light and melancholy.
Yeah. So I've done a little bit of digging, not much admittedly, but a little bit, and apparently the ideal temperature for water to go into bread making is between 41 and 46 degrees Celsius. Yes, fact fans, this week on the Bishop's Daily Bread we are discussing bread again. Now I've been using water in the mid 30s degrees Celsius range for my recent bakes, which seems to have been fine on the whole, although I did have a little disaster this week, which maybe was down to the water temperature, I don't know, but a little bit more on that later on. So the main task I set myself this week was soft dinner rolls. To cut a long story short, they were fine. It's probably awful calling something just fine, but they were fine. Neither great nor terrible. They were just fine. I was, to be quite honest with you, pleasantly surprised that they weren't terrible. They were soft inside, and the outsides, although they looked funky, they looked like they were going to be hard and nasty, but actually they were quite soft, which is what I was going for. But my, oh my, they did not rise well at any point, neither in the proving nor in the baking. They were just a bit flat looking, to be honest, but they're still soft, so, fine. Not a terrible effort, but some things to be learned, I'm sure. I'm fairly sure one of the key processes in the whole bread making thing is the kneading, and I'm definitely cutting corners there using my bread maker to do that bit for me. Because surely it can only do a limited job with that little paddle. I mean, it's only the paddle's only the size of my thumb. I mean, so maybe I just need to get over it and make the dough by hand. Perhaps I'd see an improvement all round. I think next I shall attempt, again, some rolls, but I shall try to get them to be crusty rolls on the outside and soft in the middle. I don't know exactly how to achieve that right now, but I think it's going to involve throwing some ice into the bottom of the oven once I've put the bread in to bake or something. A little bit of research to be done there, and more on that next time. So onto that disaster I mentioned. For the first time ever, I think, with my bread maker, I'd set it yesterday evening to make a simple white loaf. It went disastrously wrong. After the allotted 2.5 hours, my timer went off, and as normally happens, I completely ignore this initial timer because I'm inevitably in the middle of something else, and I just think, I'll just finish this job, then I'll go and check the bread. But this time I really ignored it. Completely forgot for several hours about this bread I had baking in the machine. And actually I had to get out of bed just before falling asleep, as I suddenly remembered, I've got a loaf of bread that still needs to be taken out of the machine. Anyway, something must have gone awry with the ingredients or something, because rather than a final cooked loaf, there was just some thoroughly overexpanded dough, to the extent that it was pushing the top of the bread maker open and oozing out of the sides, as if it was attempting to escape its Breville-branded prison and hunt down its human overlord. I don't know, I must have put in too much yeast, or the water was too hot, or whatever, I don't know. Or the yeast and the sugar just got on a bit too well this time, I'm not sure. It was simultaneously hilarious and awful to see this machine bulging with oozing bread dough. It was a little bit like, it's a film I haven't seen in a few decades, the scene from Sleeper, which in my head was bread dough. There was a scene with bread dough and something similar, but upon investigating, it turns out to be something called instant pudding. This is the film from the 70s, set in the 22nd century. And I've got these distinct memories from childhood of Woody Allen's character beating this amorphous brown blob back into submission with a broom. The clip is on YouTube if you've never seen it or you want a refresher. A little side note proving the dangers of a wild and rampant free internet. Once you find out what they called the stuff Woody Allen's character was making, it was called instant pudding, and then do a search for Sleeper instant pudding to try and find out a little more about it. What's the first search result? A recipe for instant pudding from Sleeper. The wonders of the modern age, eh? How many souls have we lost around the world to this beige beast running rampant through suburbia? I dread to think. Surely the first search result should be a cautionary tale of the perils of instant pudding, and perhaps even more importantly, how to defeat said pudding with a household broom. Anyway, I left this disaster dough in the fridge overnight. No particular idea what effect that would have, but it was, 12:30 at night. I wasn't going to bake it then and there. So I put it into bake this morning, and I shall let you know before this podcast is over how this disaster bread turns out. Keep your ears peeled. So there we go, another episode of the Long Road Podcast. Thanks very much for listening. As promised, a quick bread update. Actually, you know what, it looks wonky as heck, but tastes delicious. Soft inside, tastes like proper bread. Nice crunchy outside. Ironically, it's perhaps the very best loaf of bread this particular bread maker has ever had a hand in. I'm very pleasantly surprised. Please do subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. The next episode will be out next week, Friday the 28th of February 2020. As always, you can check out our past episodes of the podcast on artisan-creative.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Let us know what you think. Tell us what you like about the podcast, the music, the shows. You can find us on Facebook, Steve Bonham on Facebook. That's our main social media channel. We've also got our YouTube channel, youtube.com/SteveBonham01. Please subscribe there and have a look at the videos on there. You can follow us on Twitter. Steve's on SteveBonham01. I'm at Chris Lydon. D-A-S, Chris Lydon, Lydon. And Kev, unfortunately, is definitely still banned from Twitter. How very rock and roll. We're on Instagram as well, Steve Bonham 01 on Instagram. If you want to go to the website, artisan-creative.com, sign up to the mailing list. I think there's a mailing coming out in the next few weeks, but it's only every quarter, it's only every 3 months, so it's absolutely not a bombardment in your inbox, but it keeps you up to date with what's going on. Whilst you're on that website, artisan-creative.com, you can get a free download of the ebook of Steve's book, A Little Nostalgia for Freedom, if you so desire. All of the band's music is on Spotify and Apple Music, so you can go there, just search for Steve Bonham and the Long Road, you'll find us. Our latest EP, which was released in October 2019, is on there, including National Indie Radio Song of the Year, Wrapped Up in You, which we played you earlier on, and the epic American Wilderness, and one of my favourites, Interstate 25. So, thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers. Remember, the world isn't beige, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with the Long Road. Bye for now.